welcome you to This Week at Calvary. We're going to do things a little differently over the next few weeks. We're going to take some time and discuss the following topic: in defense of liberty. We live in a day where so many of our liberties have been taken away, and if we're not careful, many more will follow. We're going to be interviewing folks and preaching on the subject of in defense of liberty. Be sure to have your Bible ready. Be ready to take some notes. Be a part of This Week at Calvary, brought to you by the Calvary Baptist Church in Portsmouth, Ohio, and on the web at callsofcalvary.com. Well, I'm very glad to have as my guest this morning our State Senator Terry Johnson. And he has definitely been a friend to our church, been a friend to my family, and I think ultimately been a great friend to our community in representing us in Columbus. And so I'm glad to have him on with us. And Senator Johnson, it's good to have you with us today.
Hey, good day. Happy to be here, Ryan, and thank you so much for those kind words.
Now, we know we're right in the middle of something that's for sure unprecedented in my lifetime.
Yeah.
How is the state working right now? How are things different than they were? How are you able to operate in what you're doing?
Well, these are extraordinary times, historic times. We've never really seen this in the history of the United States because if you look back to the last massive pandemic, the Spanish flu, that was a devastating disease that swept the globe and it hit America, right in the breadbasket. It was just a terrible blow to the American economy. But we weren't as interconnected back then as we are now.
Right.
Today, it's a completely different story. With airports and trains to transport things and trucks to transport things and people, moving back and forth and traveling to other countries. This is a different circumstance. And then also we're interconnected electronically so we can communicate. So these things work for us and they work against us. As far as the state of Ohio is concerned, the governor's put out directives. And the thing that I like about what we've done to respond to that, people have stepped up and done the right thing.
Good.
They've looked out for the older folks, who are most vulnerable. We know for a fact if this new little virus that we've never seen before on the earth, if it gets into a nursing home, it devastates a nursing home. So it's very, very important for us to understand the lethality of this disease, how highly infectious it is, and then to step up and do the right thing. Like, if they recommend that you don't have a large group in a small room, that makes sense. But as Americans, we can still do it. But is it really a smart thing to do right now?
Right.
And so the fact that we've voluntarily taken a hit to try to look out for our friends and neighbors, that says a lot about Americans and it says a lot about Christians.
Well, the Bible says all things are lawful, but not all things are expedient, meaning I may have the right to do it, but it's not necessarily a good idea. And I think that's what we find Americans really kind of living out right now, wouldn't you say?
I think that's it exactly. And, I really like what you said, a few weeks ago about not just surviving this, but learning to thrive in it through our Christian faith. Yeah. Oh my! And my wife Jennifer picked up on that, and then you all got together, made some T-shirts, and got that message out. If you haven't seen those shirts, you need to look on Pastor Brown's Facebook page, see what those are, and we've got some banners to go along with it. But it's not just here. I was asked to join a Facebook group just a couple of days ago. It's crosses, crucifixes, crosses down in Georgia, and people are putting them up to show that they have their Christian
Amen.
faith. And people are just proudly putting that cross out in front of their house.
Well, I appreciate everything that government has done, and I appreciate everything that people have done to make people aware and help people make decisions. But ultimately, it's going to come down to the Lord intervening. The Lord brings us through. The Lord provides the comfort. And that's the ultimate resource, I think, for everybody. And so being able to point people to the cross, I think is the most vital thing that we do right now,
I agree 100%. We can look at this and say, oh my, and wail and weep and cower, or we can say, what an opportunity to come closer to God.
Amen. Now, this is something that you're kind of uniquely situationed. If my understanding is right, there are only two doctors in the state house. Is that correct?
I think there's also a physician over on the House side now also.
Okay.
There are two in the Senate.
What do you think your background as a physician, how do you think that uniquely positions you maybe to understand a little bit about what's being asked of Americans right now? How do you think that that kind of uniquely positions you for that?
Well, I always, people ask me, they say, "Hey, what should we call you?" Because I got a lot of different titles, you know, and so I always come back to, please just call me Terry. But on the other hand, um, God moved in my life, and by the most improbable set of circumstances you can possibly imagine, led me to medical school. you know,
Mm,
and so there I am in medical school, thinking, "Oh my goodness, should I even be here?" I was a history major, thought I wanted to be a lawyer, but that was a blessing. He brought me to medical school, and then I thought, I'm competing against kids here that are smarter than me, and they studied science, and here I studied American history and politics. How can I compete? He brought me through that. He brought me through all that, and through 30 years of family practice now, and it's a very unique perspective that a physician brings to something like a pandemic.
right.
I can't even begin to express, how I see it, as opposed to somebody that didn't have the blessing of going to medical school or having 30 years of practice. So to bring that to bear in government policy, and not just for the current pandemic, but also issues like anti-abortion legislation
Right.
and civil rights legislation, things that make us free and keep us free, and keeping us close to the Constitution. The perspective of a physician and the way we think, you wouldn't want, all your senators to be physicians, but my goodness, what a blessing it is to have a couple of these conservative physicians in the Senate.
Now, couple that with 8 years in the House. And
Yep.
so you have a familiarity with
Yep.
how Columbus operates. Now,
That's correct.
you are not a newborn babe into this political arena. You've been up there for a while. How does that change your perspective as you've
Oh,
been working through these days that you've been senator?
well, as you know, I was appointed to this position back in September of 2019 when former Senator Joe Eaker, a strong conservative, strong man of God, strong pro-life person, he stepped aside to take a different position with ODOT. And it's wonderful that he did that, because he continues to serve us in a way that brings his experience to bear for the people of Southern Ohio, a very unique way. But when he stepped aside and I stepped in, I was appointed because I had great relationships with virtually everybody on the appointment committee. It was a room full of people that were looking to see who would be the best candidate, and they knew me. I was a known quantity, and I've got a proven record of upholding conservative thought and policy, and knowing how to get legislation passed. I can't even begin to express to you how difficult it is to actually get a bill through one side of the legislature, much less two, and signed by the governor.
I can imagine.
I can do that. I know how to do it. And it's because I have great relationships with people. And those relationships are the foundation of being successful in Columbus.
Well, very good. Well, we've emphasized those things. I encourage you to stay with us. We'll be back in just a few moments for the next part of our interview with our state senator, Terry Johnson, as we're going to talk about some of those relationships maybe here locally and those people that have had really made all these things happen. We'll be back in just a few moments.
In a small country town, children form a parade with flag bearers leading the way. Far teachers, the old and the young, lift their voices together to sing. I pledge my allegiance to the grand old flag and the promise of hope from sea to sea. Under God, one nation undivided, we will stand, lift the banner of liberty. Where a child is hungry, where men have no home, where the powerless are yearning to breathe free. May we fight for justice till there's justice for all, and become what God meant us to be. So I pledge my allegiance to the grand old flag and the promise of hope from sea to sea. Under God, one nation undivided, we will stand, lift the banner of liberty. Yes, I pledge my allegiance to the grand old flag and the promise of hope from sea to sea. Under God, one nation undivided, we will stand, lift the banner of liberty. Under God, one nation undivided, we will stand, lift the banner, lift the banner, lift the banner of liberty.
James 4:8. Draw nigh to God, and he will draw nigh to you. Cleanse your hands, ye sinners, and purify your heart, you devil-minded. James 4:8.
Very good. We're back for the next part of our interview in Defense of Liberty with our State Senator Terry Johnson. And we talked about some kind of philosophical things in the first half. And if we can kind of turn this second half into some practical discussion on say, hey, I ran for office.
Yeah.
And here's why. I talked to one person that contemplated running for office, and his wife said, "Can you spell?" And he said, "Yes." She said, "All right, repeat after me." And she spelled the word divorce. She said, "Go ahead and run, but I'm out."
Oh, my.
You can't do this without your family.
Right.
You can't do this without support.
Yeah.
But at some point, you had to come to the point personally where you said, these are the reasons I'm running.
Yeah.
It can't be for power. If it is, it's a bad influence. It's a bad reason.
That's correct.
Why did you run? And what are the things you feel that you need to defend as far as liberty?
A long time ago, I learned to listen to my heart and allow God to work in your heart. You know, when you tell people who don't believe in God that you listen to God, they immediately brand you schizophrenic. They say you should be on medicine. You know, they say you're a kook or a nut. And the fact of the matter is, if God's not speaking in your heart, that's actually a shame, and it's not the way things should be. So I learned as a younger man to listen to my heart, because when I tried to do things my own way and it wasn't working out. And the minute I started to listen to what was in my heart, things got better for me and for my family. And when 9/11 happened, I felt in my heart that I needed to get more involved. Now, I was a physician, and I was in the military as a National Guardsman, and I was plenty busy. I had a lot of things going. I was a Rotarian, involved in the community, doing a lot of things. I was teaching medical students. Most people will look at me and say, "I mean, you're too busy. Don't try to do anything else." And after 9/11 happened, I felt I needed to get involved in politics. I don't know why, but I listened to my heart. God was speaking to me. And so I did. I got more involved. And the first thing that happened after I got involved, I ran for a precinct county chair in our local Republican Party.
And I was appointed. It's not hard to win that one. Hardly anybody wants to do that, especially if you're going to do it the right way. And the first night I was there, one of the county commissioners at the time, a wonderful lady named Opal comes up to me and says, Terry, it was Opal Spears at the time, Terry, our coroner is resigning. We need you to step up and do this. I said, whoa, this is my first meeting, as an elected county precinct chair. And I said, and I thought, I don't want to do that, so I said no. And then she kind of sulked away like, wow. It was like the perfect thing. She wanted me to do this. She could see it. And I said no. I just said no. And then 15 or 20 minutes later, I thought, oh, I should have said yes. So I went over and asked her more about it. Oh, don't worry about it. It's not a big deal. No one wants to be coroner, and it'll be an appointment, and it'll be an easy election because, who's going to run against? Next thing I know, I go home and talk to my wife, tell her the same thing. She says, I don't know. Next thing I know, I'm in a full-blown election. I'm buying billboards out of my own pocket. I got my kids on TV. It's splashed all over the place. There's sign wars in August. It was just terrible. And my wife says, look what you got us into, But on the other hand, she actually supported me 100%. Yeah. And we moved out on doing the right thing. That got me involved in politics. At that point, my Rolodex for politics, I had my name in it and my wife's. I didn't know anybody. So I started putting together support. I prayed for support. And Democrats and Republicans and independents came to me and helped me win that election. Yeah. And then I carried that for 8 years. And I ran for state representative. And I did state representative for a lot of different reasons. And too long of a story to go into. But again, I was listening to my heart. I had no interest in state politics whatsoever and was moved to get into state politics in a district I could not win. It was a deep blue district. A Republican hadn't won it since I was born. I was born in 1957. About that time, there was a Republican state representative. Since then, it had been blue. And I couldn't win it. I didn't have the money. The person I was running against had a lot of money. We won. How did that happen? I listened to my heart. I did the right thing. And all through that campaign, I talked to God and listened to God, and He took me through it. And when I became a state representative, then I realized that the center of gravity for setting America right is not in Washington. The center of gravity where most things have to happen is here. So now we have a pro-life doctor supporting every piece of pro-life legislation that was going on, a pro-Second Amendment doctor, a pro-Bill of Rights doctor.
So liberty really began for you as a primary motivation in the womb.
That's correct.
I mean, you thought, I've got to protect people there.
That's correct. Yeah.
And from there, you move into different aspects of life.
Yeah.
Talk to me about like school. I mean, you're involved in education and these sorts of things. Mm-hmm. It may not be your precise thrust, but we still have to defend liberty in those areas. We still have to defend liberty as people grow along.
Yeah.
How do you see that yourself plugging into those things?
Listen, this is one of the things that I have difficulty getting a handle on, and everyone does. While we were asleep, while we were away from the watchtower, while we were not vigilant, America's education system has been taken over by liberals and progressives from kindergarten through graduate school. And so if you go to a major university and you want to espouse conservative ideas, that's a tough thing to do. We have young college Republicans here in Scioto County that don't really feel like they're that safe when they want to bring up ideas.
Right.
It's all over America. If you want to walk on any of Ohio's university campuses and you want to talk about God and religion, or if you want to bring in a controversial speaker, they always label them a conservative. There's always a reaction to it. That should be the place where ideas are welcomed, universities. And so, when we were trying to pass the heartbeat bill, we didn't get it done in the 8 years I was there. I supported it every time. We came so close. John Kasich, we had to override his veto because he didn't like the heartbeat bill. It's Republican governor. And we had people over in the Senate. We just couldn't quite get it done. We came so close, and Republicans are the ones that thwarted us, but we had to get a super majority, a two-thirds majority to override the veto. But when I walked the gauntlet that day to go in and take that vote, it's one of the last things I did as a lame duck. I had people giving me the finger. I had people cursing me, telling me what a horrible human being I was for trying to stand up for the unborn.
Yeah.
You know, so the most vulnerable among us, who God knows in the womb, right? I have these people, and these are folks that absolutely think they're right, and they're happy to judge you to the nth degree. At the same time, telling you shouldn't judge anybody,
Right.
especially not them.
How do you feel that you have a role in protecting another of those First Amendment and those essential statements, life and liberty, pursuit of happiness? How do you feel that you can help protect religious freedom? Because religious liberty will be more and more under attack as our
Absolutely.
nation goes further and further from God. What is your role there? What do you feel is your responsibility?
My role is to tell people how I feel. And so, when people say you shouldn't say things about God in certain venues, I go right ahead and do it anyway. I always have, and I always will. And so I'm just not afraid to express my opinion. And so if my committees, when I was a committee chair in the House of Representatives for 8 years, my committees began with a prayer and the pledge. I told people, so if you don't really, want to do this, you can step outside. I just ask you to be respectful. And then we have the prayer and the pledge. And, in the last years I was there, a Democrat actually did the prayer for me. So this isn't a Democrat-Republican thing. This is an American thing. It's a God thing. It's all about us being what God intends us to be. So I just don't have any trouble doing these things.
Sometimes people have a misunderstanding or maybe even a lack of illumination on certain subjects. For instance, there's a great move in our culture that removing God is going to increase liberty, but all it's done is increase oppression.
Correct.
How would you speak to that person that needs to understand, what? God is an essential to our liberty.
Yeah.
Because, you may not get what you want,
Correct.
but that doesn't mean you're in the right.
That's correct. And a free country, as we started out, as free as any country has ever been, this republic that we were handed, in that republic, you didn't have to go to church. You didn't have to worship God.
Yeah.
You were fine. No one's going to oppress you for not going to church. So what's the beef?
Yeah.
Why does it bother you if other people do?
Right.
And that freedom that we had to worship or not worship was exactly the freedom that God gives us. The devil, he didn't give you any freedom. He's got one game all day long. It's death, it's destruction, and he'll make you as miserable in your life as you'll let him do. God gives you a choice. You don't have to come to God, but why wouldn't you?
Right.
And so when we oppress God, we remove the choice, and we're left with the other guy's playing field. And you look at Kenosha, Wisconsin, it's kind of like, Halloween, in Michigan when they burn everything up every year.
Right. Now, as we bring all this to a close, we're trying to challenge people in defense of liberty. Let's take the elected official aspect out of it. Let's take the corporate church worship aspect out of it. Let's talk to each individual listener. And I'd like you to convey to them what you feel their responsibility is to stand up in defense of liberty. Just a simple statement. Why they're standing up impacts everybody else.
When they don't, we get what we have.
Yeah.
A God, family, country. If we don't serve as leaders of our own life, if we don't serve as leaders of our families' lives, who will? Leadership, it's interesting. If you don't lead, somebody else will. If somebody else leads, who is that person leading? And then you can gripe about it, you can complain about it, you can sit home and hold your head and moan, but you didn't lead.
Yeah.
So somebody else did. Someone will always lead. So why in the world wouldn't Christians step up in America and vote?
Yeah.
Democrats, Republicans, vote the Bible.
Yeah.
You know, I get a lot of Democrats that vote for me because they are pro-life.
Yeah.
They are pro-gun. They are pro-family, pro-country, pro-military. And listen, if it ever comes the day in the 14th Senate District here down here in southern Ohio, when that's not popular, I won't be elected anymore because I'm not going to change.
Right.
That just won't happen.
Well, that's good to hear. I'm grateful to have you on here, and I'm grateful to have elected officials that when I talk to them about in defense of liberty, they don't shy away from it. They would agree where we would agree as a church and I as a pastor that it comes out of our relationship with God, and it all blooms into just this beautiful, beautiful forest that God can give us if we just begin that relationship with Him.
Yes, sir.
I thank you very much for being our guest, and I thank you for the words you had to say.
You're welcome, Pastor. God bless.
God bless you.